Cool. Right, so welcome everyone, and well done students for coming. I was saying after half term I wasn't sure how many students would remember, so I sent a last minute panic reminder. But we've got, I mean, some of you have been doing this, coming to these sessions since November, so it's amazing. Really think about how many different speakers you've met, and kind of that, you know, you should know the Department of International Trade inside and out by now. You've met so many people, so it's been so, you know, so great and such a good experience for you. But we've only got 2 more left, so we've got this week, and then we've got next week, which is focused on LGBTQ plus in government. So that should be a really interesting session as well. And I know that some of you have signed up to the mentoring scheme as well. So that's kicking off tomorrow. With, if you're involved in that, that's the introductory to that session, and you can start emailing your mentors. I don't know if Paige or Jane, are you mentoring at all? Are you in the mentoring scheme?
I'm in the tutoring scheme, but not the mentoring.
Not the mentoring. Okay. That's fine.
Yeah,
There's probably
I'm
a lot.
so new. They probably wouldn't let me mentor anyone. I'm the one who needs mentoring.
You probably need a mentoring.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna. So as usual, students, if you want to speak, you can obviously unmute yourselves. We want this to be a really quite informal session, really, to learn. You know, we have got a presentation, but we really want to learn from Jane and Paige's experience. So put your questions in the chat, or speak, and put your hand up if you want to ask a question. But other than that, I'll hand over to, I don't know who's starting, Jane or Paige.
We'll know when we see the first slide. I guess first of all, hi everyone. Nice to sort of see you all virtually. Yeah, I think as John said, we want to keep this quite informal, quite relaxed. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to write in the chat box, or just give us a shout. We'll be very honest with our answers, we promise. So we've kind of got these slides, which Jane's thankfully sharing. They're more of a guide, really. We're kind of just going to more focus on, you know, our experiences as female economists in the civil service, and also kind of at university and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, we'll kind of just go from there. So do you want to, I don't know, who's first? Is it me? Yes. So hi, I'm Paige. So I'm obviously at DIT, and I work as an economic advisor. So I lead on procurement analysis for free trade agreements. So kind of everything, all the sort of post-Brexit stuff, and us trying to, as a UK, get a better trade deal. I basically work on that kind of stuff. So not only working sort of bilateral free trade agreements, so at the moment we're working with a free trade agreement with the US, with Australia, with New Zealand and Japan. We've got other ones coming up, but we also work across sort of wider agreements, such as the government procurement agreement and CPTPP. So these are sort of two really big trade agreements, and then I work across those. So my role kind of varies every sort of day to day, from sort of overall strategy planning, sort of figuring out how to best feed analysis into our policy and into our strategy, to sort of actually doing the actual sort of analysis itself. It really depends. I'm currently got an apprentice who works with me as well, and I'm hoping to have a fast streamer join me at some point, but at the moment it's just sort of myself and my apprentice sort of manning the fort of procurement analysis, as it were. So that's kind of a sort of general overview of me and my role. So yeah, that's very broad, but I guess at the moment, so for a bit of context, you might see in the news that we're currently negotiating with Australia. Well, I've literally this morning just come off a phone call with Australia for the free trade agreement negotiations. So we're very much in the thick of it at the moment. And obviously you've probably also seen, you know, the new Biden administration in America, that's had an impact. So it's a very much a reactive role to everything that's going on in kind of the international sort of area, particularly with COVID. Everything's kind of got another level of thinking behind it, because you've got to basically do these free trade agreements in the context of a global pandemic, which is probably why right now I am in my flat in Brixton and not in Australia, which is a little bit sad, but oh well, we move on. So yeah, I'm from London. So I'm actually from North London, so not too far from Sister Islington College. And I studied economics at the University of Nottingham. So I graduated in 2018, so about 3 years ago now. I did a BA at Nottingham, so yeah, not too long ago. And I just did A-levels before that at a school in North London as well. So I had a little bit of a different sort of start, I guess, to my economics career. I actually initially went to the University of Edinburgh to study politics, mainly because I didn't have maths A level. So I was like, oh, I can't be an economist. I'm not a maths genius. So I went to the University of Edinburgh to study politics, was there for about 2 months and absolutely hated it. Just wasn't for me. I really liked economics at school. Politics wasn't really my kind of area of sort of passion, I guess you probably could call it. So I decided to sort of drop out of Edinburgh and applied to Nottingham to do economics, because you didn't need maths A level to study economics at Nottingham. And I actually loved it. It was a great decision in the end. Edinburgh was beautiful and lovely, but just not quite for me. So in my year before I joined university, I worked in journalism for a year. So I went to the BBC for a bit, and then went to university, and then went through the fast stream application process and joined the economics fast stream in 2018. And I recently left the fast stream about 6 months ago, and now I'm an economic advisor in DIT. So yeah, I think, Jane, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, I can only see my slide right now, so if someone asks a question or something, please do shout at me because I can't see anything. But yeah, hi everyone, I'm Jane. I'm quite a new economist at the DIT. I joined in December, so I'm still really new. I graduated last year from University College London. I also studied economics, so I can remember exactly what it was like to do my A levels, to be honest. I am also from northwest London, so yeah, and yeah, my path into where I am now, which is well, my job is an analyst who in the export and promotions analysis team. So the UK has loads of export promotion programs that encourage exporters to export and encourage businesses to start exporting. And my job is basically seeing how well we are at doing that, how many exporters are exporting because of our programs, how successful are our programs, and are they a good value for money for what the taxpayer is paying for. So my job's quite different to Paige's. Hers is a lot more, negotiation side, and mine's a bit more analytical. I get to use the degree in economics a lot. Unlike Paige, I loved maths. I did maths and third maths at school, so I really enjoyed that side of it. But economics is so varied. If you go on to do it at university, you can be a mathsy person, you can not be a mathsy person, you can still be great at the subject. So it's quite wide in its breadth. I joined on the fast stream as well. So far, the application process was pretty simple for me, but I applied to loads of sorts of jobs just because I was not that sure what I wanted to do. So I applied for private corporations as well. But I ended up choosing to work for the government for various reasons. But yeah, that's kind of a quick background for me. So Paige, would you like to?
Yeah, sounds good. So I guess it's probably no too surprise, considering the name of this presentation, that we're here to talk about specifically being a female economist and being a female in kind of analysis in general. This is going to be very sort of broad. We've got some sort of slides to kind of give us some sort of statistics, but I think I'll probably talk about sort of personal experience. So my experience is not going to be necessarily the experience of everyone else's. Jane's experience might be different to mine, but we can only really draw off of what we've kind of gone through ourselves. But I guess in terms of sort of putting it into a broader perspective of sort of economists and stuff, so it is quite a known fact that male economists are more common than female economists. So, for example, I think the stat we've got here is only 20% of senior economists are women in the US, and only 15% of professors are women. So, you can already see that there, and that is also reflected in things like the Nobel Prize. I think there's only been 2 women who have won that. And I guess probably the biggest sort of area where you can sort of see that is in UK universities. So female students, we make up sort of 57% of all undergraduates, but only 33% of those study economics. So you can really see that although, you know, females are really going to university and you know, getting their undergraduate degrees and stuff, in terms of sort of economics, we are the minority. I think there is sort of, the slide is absolutely correct. There is a kind of common view that economics and sort of analysis, all that kind of mathsy stuff is better suited to men than women. The slide's right, it's not true at all. I think a lot of the time people have this perception because when you think of economics, you think of like banking, you think of the big five, finance, industry, all of that kind of stuff. But actually being an economist, you can work in so many different areas. It's not just banking and finance. The civil service and the work that Jane and I do has got nothing to do with, you know, the stock market or anything like that. It's much more about sort of policy implementation, you know, thinking about macroeconomic theory. There are so many economists across sort of the whole of the civil service, and also, you know, across, you know, the United Kingdom and various different sectors, that the sort of term economist is such a umbrella term for essentially so many different people. Like even Jane and I work in the same department in the civil service, and yeah, as she said, our jobs are completely different. But across the UK, it does seem that there is a sort of pattern forming that sort of male economists are much more sort of involved in sort of the entire industry than female economists, and that's kind of what we want to change. We really want to get like young guys like yourself really involved and knowing that they can undertake economics, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a male dominated field. It's just sort of the kind of stereotype that's been applied to it. So that's what we're trying to kind of break down really. I'm not sure what's on the next slide. Is that you, Jane? So yeah, so this is the civil service more generally. So the ratio of women to men does vary across different analytical functions. So there's actually kind of 4 main analytical functions. You've got economists, operational researchers, social researchers, and statisticians. So in terms of, you know, how that breaks down, the social research and statistics professions generally have sort of a greater number of women than men, and that even is in senior posts. So we call it SCS, which is senior civil servants. So that's kind of, you know, the big dogs of the civil service. And then you've got the other kind of civil service professions where actually it goes the other way around. There's way more men than women, specifically kind of, you know, in the economic side of things as well. And then you've got other areas as well, such as like actuarial, like digital data and tech, all that kind of stuff. So we are kind of seeing that. I think in terms of the civil service and kind of the level of where all those field economists are, I think, you know, our level, like Jane and I's, you know, we're sort of fast stream in grade 7, which is still quite sort of new to civil service, you know, sort of fairly low level. And then as you get higher, you get more senior levels, and kind of you only have sort of maybe, you know, a handful of certain higher grades. That's when you start to see the sort of ratio become more skewed in sort of the favour of men. So, you know, Jane and I were chatting before this, and we were sort of saying, you know, in terms of female economists, what does your team look like? And then actually my sort of grade 7 level and assistant analyst level just below, it's actually pretty even. Probably you'd say actually there's more female economists. But then I was looking up my sort of managerial chain, and my manager, his manager, and his manager, all men. So you can kind of see how quickly it changes in the pattern. I'm not saying that's the same for every team. That's just my team personally, but it is kind of a sort of classic example of what can happen as well. But then saying that, actually, the civil service is probably best practice in terms of gender equality. We do much better than sort of other areas as well. So even in the civil service like that, I think a lot of it, you know, even though we are maybe better than other sort of private sector firms in terms of gender equality across the board, and particularly in economics, it still is very much impacted. But yeah, I think Jane, I'll pass over to you.
So basically the question that we're trying to answer is why do we need women and minorities in economics, and to get interested? It's really you know, the work as well, it's been very much through male eyes and topics that males explore, but there's a whole half of the population that haven't had their stories told, I guess. And in economics, it can really help with the analysis side, and it can just tell us a lot about people's experiences, can help inform decision making really well. And to exclude so much of a population, it just doesn't seem like a really clever thing to do. So yeah, so in the highlight of this slide, it says diversity of backgrounds leads to diversity of perspective with better approaches and more informed decisions. And I think that's extremely important in government, especially because, yeah, like Paige said, it's a lot more pronounced here. They highlight, you know, minority ethnic groups and women, and they have networks in the civil service to facilitate this. And I remember when I joined, which is not that long ago, I had to do various trainings about diversity in the workplace and making sure that you take into account any possible subconscious biases that you might have. And I don't know if a lot of private corporations do take that into account nowadays, but I think we're quite forward thinking in terms of diversity issues. And there are whole groups in the civil service that are committed to just thinking about what that team can do in terms of diversity and inclusion. And yeah, I think even there's a women fast stream Facebook chat that I joined, and they have talks all the time from people who are in the senior civil service who are women and how they got there and their career paths. And it's really a nice inclusive culture to help each other and how to succeed as a woman in what used to be and probably still is quite a male dominated place. I think that in terms of like the degree, I think Paige and I also talked about economics as a whole as a subject, and at university how when you look around your classroom, how many men are there, and well, personally there weren't that many for me, but the most significant thing for us was how many men or you know, in a lecture hall actually put their hand up and ask lecturer questions. And usually it is just men, and I think females kind of step back a bit or tend to sit at the back of the room and just listen in on the conversation instead of taking part and engaging. And I think that's a really important conversation to have. And to be honest, I'm also guilty of doing that in the past. But now I think as you get older and you grow in confidence and you know what you're talking about a bit more, you realise that there's really nothing to be scared of. And everyone else in the room is probably as confused as you or as informed as you. So there really shouldn't be any need to be shy in a room where, especially in an educational context, I think it's really important to ask questions instead of just taking in what you're being told without questioning it. So the next section is, would careers and analysis or economics be right for you? I don't know how many of you guys even want to do economics or just looking into it, or you're set on doing economics and you know what you want to do, which is great. I think most people don't know what they do, especially at A-level. I think I just wanted to pass my exams and get out of school. But yeah, and analysis is really broad. Like Paige said, we have social researchers and statisticians, hate that word, and economists, and we all work together under the broad umbrella of analysis. Government analysis, or well, you can see this well-organized chart kind of explain it, but in economics, most people have done economics and social sciences. But yeah, in the civil service in general, you can come in having done pretty much any degree. I think in my team, even though we're analysts, I've got someone who used to be an archaeologist, and they're really good at their job. So I think you can take a lot of skills from like really transferable skills from other professions and apply it here. Yeah. So Paige, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about sort of the civil service and kind of opportunities in there. So I think the next slide is going to sort of talk about I think it's women in economics. Yeah, so the women in economics is sort of as a part of the GES. So here at the civil service, the way that sort of all economists are linked together is through what we call the GES. So when you apply for the civil service, you'll apply for the government economic service. if you're going to do sort of the fast stream or the apprenticeship, and then through that you'll get assigned to a particular department, a particular role. But you are a member fundamentally of the Government Economic Service, and within that there is a initiative called the Women in Economics Programme, which essentially promotes gender diversity. They are our representatives across the Government Economic Service. They basically try and increase female participation in economics and government academia. They do this in a variety of different ways, and each individual department will usually have their own kind of sort of subset with an economics group. So I actually had one in DWP that I ran with a friend of mine, where we essentially got all the female economists at our grade, which was HEO at the time, so that's like the fast stream grade, together, sort of just check in and see how everyone was doing. There's also wider things, so they do a lot of school outreach, really trying to increase diversity within schools. And when I say school outreach, I mean, you know, we'll probably speak to sort of year 7, year 8. So really trying to go to those younger age groups and kind of get that idea of economics in their head, and really, you know, combat those stereotypes from a really young age. And then they'll also speak to older students like yourselves, talking to you about, you know, different routes into the civil service, and kind of, you know, making you aware that there are, you know, various different areas of sort of where you can use economics. You know, you've got the private sector, you have the public sector as well. We want to increase female participation across all of these areas, you know, not just in the civil service, but also in the private sector. So depending on whether you feel like you can be better suited to a public or private sector role, that's absolutely fine, that's great. It's more about, you know, making sure that female participation in economics is really high in both sectors. So that's kind of what we do. But in the sort of civil service and specifically, we focus in with women in economics. And I think what women in economics do is, again, try not to focus too much on sort of recruiting female economists for the civil service, but sort of expanding kind of the knowledge base about what an economist can do for a variety of students. And so there are so many different things an economist can do, whether it's from journalism to actually being like an economic advisor to working, you know, in banking, whatever. And the Government Economic Service not only tries to increase participation within the government itself, but also outside of it. So it really tries to kind of expand outreach as well. So that's kind of how it sort of works here. I'm not sure what the last one, but yeah, we have virtual careers fairs as well for the women in economics. So it's really, they're really quite a big stream, and a lot of people get involved as a corporate contribution. So in the civil service, we really advertise everyone doing a corporate contribution, and most female economists will have at least something to do with women in economics, whether it's doing an outreach program like this, or actually, you know, being in the core team as well. So yeah, that's a bit of a in look at how, you know, the civil service tries to do its bit. Cool. So I think that, yeah, perfect. I think in terms of sort of broader stuff, I know that the teacher was saying that you've already had quite a lot of insight into different routes into the civil service stuff. We're more than happy to kind of go into a little bit more detail. I think more generally, just talking about, you know, being an economist and being a female economist, I think it would be wrong to say that we don't, as female economists, feel the impact. You know, we've seen the figures, we know that it's a thing, we know that there is a stereotype. It is definitely there, and there's no point trying to sort of pretend it's not. I think a lot of the time when I speak to other civil servants and other female economists as well, there is a bit of an imposter syndrome that comes along with the job when you are a female economist. And also, you know, the fast stream as well that Jane and I are on, we're also, as you can see, we're quite young. So that also plays a part in sort of how sort of people treat you. I think the civil service is very much ahead of its time, in the sense that gender equality is really advocated, and, you know, particularly for economists as well. We're doing really bad in other areas, in other private sector. I don't know, I've never worked in private sector, but from what I've heard from sort of old university peers of mine, it's not as sort of good as the civil service. But that's what we really want to try and stop, the feeling that we don't quite belong in economics because of our gender. That's really the thing that we want to try and combat, because it is there. And Jane and I were speaking, and Jane was saying, oh, maybe her, you know, university lecture halls, the gender balance seemed quite even. And then I was sort of thinking, yeah, I never really noticed that. But then I was thinking about all my friends from my course, all my course mates, they're all guys. And it was kind of, when I realized that, I was like, there's got to be a reason. And I realized it was because actually all of my group projects, all my team projects, I was probably maybe one of two girls, sometimes the only girl in the whole group. And so that's how your friendships formed. So it clearly is sort of a mismatch in terms of balance. And that's what we really want to try and combat, because the whole imposter syndrome thing, we really need to sort of get over that and move past that, I think, now. I mean, we're in 2021 now. So that's kind of how we hope to sort of combat that, is things like the Women Economics Group, speaking to, you know, girls like yourself, and sort of just broadening the whole kind of view of what a female economist is and what an economist in general does. Jane, I don't know if you had any sort of additional points you wanted to make.
No, I think that also when you get to university, you probably won't be thinking about this right now, but when you get there, a lot of people are going to be like, what have you applied to this? Have you applied to that? Career-wise, and then especially if you do economics, well, I think maybe it's because I went to a London university, but a lot of people are very geared towards like careers in banking, basically anything that will get you a lot of money really quickly. But I think that don't feel too peer pressured by that. I think focus on the degree firstly, because a lot of those people you have to get the grades to get the job firstly, so don't spend all your time just worrying about that, and actually enjoy your degree, because especially near the end of it, a lot of people will be frantically applying for jobs, and I think that if you have thought about it quite thoroughly in your first 2 years, and then you make a move and you apply to an internship or you apply to a placement year, then do it like with confidence and knowing that, yeah, I definitely want to do this, not blindly apply to like this and that just because everyone else is doing it. I think that's like probably my best advice for you. But also don't feel like, and it's usually guys who are asking you, oh, what have you applied to? Oh, I've applied to like these 10 places. So don't like feel overwhelmed by that, especially in first year. A lot of people have done their research that I never even thought about. And that might be also people who've gone to private schools are more like on top of that side of things. But yeah, I'd give that advice to you, because it really scared me when I started going to university and people were talking about it, because I had no idea. So yeah, just do your research and be confident in and have fun in your degree. Don't think too much far into the future, because yeah, you picked the degree because you enjoyed the subject, hopefully, or you're really interested in it. So enjoy the learning experience, as cliche as that sounds. But yeah.
That's so interesting listening to both of you. I mean, do ask. There's only a few of us on this call, so if you prefer students, you can just unmute your mic, raise your hand, or put your questions in the chat. But I was just going to ask, I mean, just thinking back like to your peers who you know, female peers that did study economics, but then decided to use that degree to go off and do something else. I mean, what do you think puts them off, or what did they end up? I mean, because Paige, you went into journalism to start off with. Was that just because you fancied giving that a go, or were you put off a little bit by economics as a sort of career?
But I think the fact that I initially went to study politics says a lot, because I think a lot of the interest of economics and sort of politics is quite similar in terms of current affairs. It's really up to date. It's kind of how the world is working, kind of thing. And I think politics did seem a bit more sort of attractive to me, just because the economics was such an unknown. And I did have that stereotype in my head that to be an economist, I'd have to, you know, work in bank and wear a suit and be kind of in a man's world sort of thing. I definitely had that in my head, even maybe if it wasn't I wasn't consciously aware of it. I think the journalism thing, again, it's sort of a lot of the thing that sort of put me off going into economics was sort of my soft skills were good, so you know, my communication skills, my presentation skills, all that kind of stuff was fine, and in journalism that is, you know, areas that you'll really excel in. It was the data analysis, the really technical stuff, where in my, you know, microeconomics class at university, you know, guys again would have their hands up and be almost challenging the lecturer, and I just thought, oh my god, I would never feel confident enough to do that, so I just can't be an economist, surely. But it was nothing to do with that. I was, you know, just as intelligent as many of my male peers. I didn't have the confidence to put my hand up. So I think a lot of it is a confidence thing. And I think that's just more of a commentary on society in general, why, you know, us females are sort of maybe less confident than maybe a lot of our male friends and male peers. But yeah, it was daunting. It was really daunting, the idea of going into economics. And I was, you know, going to interviews at Goldman Sachs and other sort of, you know, big banking corporations in my final year of university. And I was sitting in this, I actually remember really vividly being in an interview for one of the big five. I was in the last stage of it, and they asked me, one of the questions was, why do you want to join our company? I didn't know what to say. I literally didn't have an answer. I said, I don't. So I made something up, but it was probably the worst answer I've ever given. So I was so glad I didn't get it, because I couldn't answer their question. It was just, there was that pressure to apply for banking and finance areas, as Jane was saying. So I think it's kind of, you know, sort of you breaking the mold a little bit. Again, Jane's very different, but I hated maths at school. So I thought, I can't do that either. So I think it was just a lot of self-doubt, to be honest, that was the reason more than anything. And I think kind of you hear things about economics and banking finance, and you do kind of imagine, you know, people like Adam Smith, who's like the sort of classic economist. If you Google Adam Smith, he's like who everyone kind of pictures. But an economist can be so many different people. So yeah, I think it was probably a mixture of my idea of what economics was, the industry in general, and also just a lot of sort of self-doubt and confidence from what my experience and kind of education in general. But yeah, Jane, I don't know what your experience was.
Yeah, I think most of my female friends who did economics do things like are either working in something like in the public sector, like me, or doing some sort of consulting. But an industry like banking is a little, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but that's a word that you hear a lot. It's quite intense, that the work-life balance is not like the same as we get. So I think things like consulting, which is a really broad term. I think you can consult on pretty much anything, but like management and strategy is the key industries that I see women go into. Yeah, I also worked at a consultancy for an internship once, and it was pretty poor in terms of how many women I saw. Like you can see when you walk into the building, there's loads of women, but in terms of like the directors, the partners, I didn't really know any. So that was a bit of a red flag for me when I came to think at the end of the internship, is this a place I want to work permanently? Maybe not. But yeah, in terms of government, I think it's a lot more open and a lot more diverse, and they're looking to change. They want to change, because a lot of the times they companies put in like a team just to deal with diversity. Okay, fine, but it's the people at the top making the real decisions and the decisions that count. So by putting in this team, are you actually doing anything that's going to make a change, or are they just going to advise you to, I don't know, hire more women and then you ignore them again? It's like that. But at the civil service, it feels a lot more like everyone's pitching in their ideas, and when they draft up, you know, their diversity statement, they ask for recommendations or people to kind of help the team with their ideas. So it's a lot more collaborative, I think, over here.
Michelle's just asked a question. So would you say it's more difficult for women in this industry to progress in their career compared to men?
I mean, I can only comment on my own experience. I mean, obviously there's now regulation and laws to make sure that's not the case. But I would say it is a little bit harder, not because of the fact that women aren't encouraged to, but I do think it says a lot, as I was saying before, about imposter and the confidence thing. I think that's a reason why it is maybe harder to. So I recently got my grade 7 promotion, so like to economic advisor from the fast stream. And I only applied because my line manager basically forced me to, because I said that I wasn't ready. I said that, you know, I couldn't do it. And I said, no, I think I just want another year as a HEO. And then I was looking at sort of who else was applying, and all my male colleagues who had been in the civil service exactly the same amount of time, they were all going for promotion. but I was much more cautious about going for it because I didn't think I was ready. I didn't think I had the skills, that sort of stuff. And I think that is what makes it harder for women to progress. And I did end up applying, and I did end up getting it. So I obviously proved myself wrong in that aspect. But I think we are a lot more in general. I mean, I'm not saying every female is like this, but from what I've seen, a lot of my female colleagues, we've taken our time going for promotion because we are a little bit more cautious. Whereas guys will just apply. They will just go for it. Like, why not? What have they got to lose? They don't worry about if they don't get it. I think we get a bit more nervous about it. And I think that we're a bit more cautious and maybe don't go for opportunities as quickly. And that's what we need to stop doing. I mean, I'm so glad I got this role, but I was so close to not doing it. And the only reason I did is because I had a really great male economist line manager who said, you've got imposter syndrome, stop it, and literally said it. So I think sometimes you need to have, we've got really good advocates in the civil service. So I think you've got someone who's advocating for you, a really good line manager who's aware of, you know, the fact that you're a female economist in quite a male dominated industry. That will really help. So I think a lot of it is we need to have advocates, as you know, all across, whether it's female or male economists, but also having that confidence. But in actual practice, in terms of is it harder to be promoted, I don't think so. I actually think that, you know, female economists are doing so much better because we do have that additional perspective. We kind of look at things in various different ways. So I would say in practical terms, no. In terms of confidence and your own personal ability to want to go for it, probably. But that again is based on my own experience, and you guys might have way more confidence than I do, which I hope you do. But yeah, I don't know about you, Jane, from what you've seen.
Yeah, I would probably just add that it's also specific to the process. So here there's a lot of process. So like things are kind of expected. So after 2 years you do this, and then people expect you to move on to this, or like, you know, there's very much like a clear ladder to go up and time frames. Whereas I think if you're in the private sector, it can be a bit more blurry, and it can be a bit more dependent on your ability to build relationships with the higher ups. So when you're working in a private firm, I think there's a lot more. It depends who decides who if you get the promotion, but like there's a lot more of a culture where, oh, I feel pressured to have to go to the pub after work or something like that, or hang out with you know, and ask people who are a partner or a director if they want to network or like chat about my career or things like that. And women don't really do that. They don't think, oh, I'll schedule a meeting with someone who's like really important to talk about my career. It doesn't really come naturally to me anyway. But yeah, I think in the private sector, that's also a barrier, because it's very much like a boys' club in some places, which is a bit of a shame. It really depends on the work culture of the firm itself. But I think from what my friends have said about their workplaces, that's a real barrier, because men, like, it's really a male-dominated industry already, and it's the men making most of the decisions. So if I'm a man, it's easier for me to build a relationship with other men. And yeah, I think that's what's good about here as well, because it's a lot more, you know, it's a lot less like depending on how well you network, and a lot more how good's the work. What, like, are you actually good at your job, and would you be good at the job that you're going for? And you know, here's the evidence. And it's a very transparent process, is what I'm saying, the promotion process. Not that I've gone through it, but from what I've heard, it sounds a lot better compared to other places.
I'll just be really interested, because we've got a nice little group here that if anyone's comfortable saying or just putting it in the chat, but I mean, what's your experience of being in the classroom? I mean, are you a sort of super confident group of girls here, or can you relate to anything that Paige and Jane are saying? I'll see if anyone puts anything in there. Is it presumably like the civil service also have very sort of family-friendly policies? Because that's just a big issue, isn't it? Kind of when you know, obviously I've got 3 children. I've experienced that as you work your way up a career ladder and you have children, and it's kind of so you know, that impacts so much on your career progression, I think, for women. Oh, sorry, just something's popped up. I mean, yeah, so presumably civil service has very family friendly policies.
Yeah, we really advertise work-life balance. We're such an advocate of it. I think it varies from department to department, but our general policies are the same. So a lot of sort of colleagues of mine who have children, they maybe work condensed hours. So they'll work 4 days a week and they'll just kind of do more hours over those 4 days, so they can spend more time on the Friday with their children, with their family, or whatever. I think also that's also for the men as well. They get exactly the same considerations as well. So it's really even across that sort of aspect, particularly with COVID. A lot of our colleagues have had to do, be economists in the civil service and then also home tutors for toddlers and 5-year-olds and all that kind of stuff, which seems like a much more difficult job. So, and the civil service has been really great in accommodating that. We have flexi time. So we don't get paid overtime or anything like that, but instead what we do is if you work even 10 minutes over your daily allowance of hours, you get that back. You can take that back whenever you need to. So it is really advocated. Sometimes you do have to push for your work-life balance, particularly at the moment we're doing international trade negotiations. It's very, very busy. But every hour I've worked over my kind of daily hours, I will take back at some point. I don't have kids to worry about, so I'll probably just take it for a holiday if I'm ever allowed to with COVID, but that kind of thing. So yeah, it is really, really well done. And I think, men and women are given much the same consideration. We do shared parental leave as well. And yeah, people basically in the civil service, as long as you're doing your hours, it doesn't matter when you do them. So some of our colleagues will log off between, say, 2 to 5 to do the school run and, get the kids home, and then they'll log back on around 7. So it's really flexible. So I think that's something the civil service has. And I'd like to think that the culture is shifting towards that more, particularly with COVID. Like the civil service was always quite ahead of the game in terms of work from home. We were very easily able to adapt to COVID because people work from home all the time. Even before COVID, I worked from home maybe once a week. I now expect to probably go to do twice a week. So going on the tube 5 days a week now just doesn't seem even like fair. So yeah, I'd say it is really, really good. And I've had a lot of friends who have been, full-time economists, absolutely bossing it, and also a full-time mum to 3 kids, so it's definitely easier to kind of do both in the civil service. You don't have to choose between your family and your career. You can absolutely do both. And I'm hoping that will be reflected in the private sector as well. But I don't have any experience in the private sector, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Well, thank you, both of you. It's been such an interesting talk. I think it's been one of the most interesting ones yet, actually. So I hope is there any more final questions? Otherwise we'll bring it to the end. I mean, presumably you can share your PowerPoint that I can forward on to students. It'd be really interesting if any of you are thinking about doing the EPQ, the extended project qualification. I think this would be a really interesting topic to kind of dive into. Where they can interview you.
I did my my level 2 EPQ. I remember the process. It was really, really good. I did it on I think I did it on women's perception media, so very much again the whole gender one. So it's a very good topic, I think, to carry on to EPQ as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you. So I don't think there's any more questions coming in, but yeah, thank you so much to both of you. Really, really, really interesting. And yeah, I shall forward on your PowerPoint to everyone that's here. So if there's no final questions, students, I'll stop recording, and we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next week for the final session.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys.